disability it's an emerging concept, and it's not just the physical and the biological stuff. It also has psychosocial side to it. And the WHO has something called the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health. And that talks about disability in three main areas. So we've got the body functions and the body structures, and that's what I would call, that's when I talk about impairments. So if a part of the body is damaged, so for example, in leprosy, we sometimes see that there are fingers missing or there are toes missing. That would be an impairment. Equally, a muscle that wasn't working well anymore, it was weak or it was paralyzed, that would be an impairment. But the second aspect of that is that the activities that I need to do day to day. So at the moment, I'm talking to you on a computer, and to use a computer, I need to use my eyes, I need to use my ears because this is a video call, and I also need to use my hands to manipulate the mouse and the keyboard. And any of the impairments I have of my eyes, of my ears, or my hands might affect the activity of using a computer or taking part in this video call. Another example of an activity might be driving, or it might be using a sewing machine, it might be writing, it might be tying my shoelaces. So that's another aspect of what we call disability. And then there's a third aspect, which is the participation. And actually, sometimes for people affected by leprosy, that can be the biggest thing, because you might be able to manage, it might not bother you that you don't have your little finger, for example, because it's been damaged by leprosy. It might not bother you that much that you can't use a computer mouse if that's not something you need to do. But if you're not allowed to go to church, or you're not allowed to go to the mosque or to the temple, whatever religion that you follow, or your children are not allowed to go to school because of the stigma that's put towards people with disabilities, and specifically people with leprosy-related disabilities, then that's a problem to you. And so that's a wider definition of disability. And for highly stigmatized diseases like leprosy, you might not need impairments. It might just be the diagnosis of leprosy, or even the suspicion that you have leprosy or that leprosy is in your family, that can give you the participation restriction. So disability has those three aspects: the impairments, the activity limitation, and the participation restriction. And all that is actually within a context, and that's another part of our understanding, is that, you know, I live in Leeds in England, and there are facilities here. I live in a house with a certain structure. There are roads that are well tarmacked. There are pavements that are smooth. There is a bus stop just outside my house. The shops have disability access. The schools can make reasonable accommodation. So there are environmental factors that mean that I can adapt somewhat. I'm not saying that my friends who are people with disability, that they don't have barriers they face here in England. But imagine if I was living, you know, on the foothills of Himalayas, and needed to get to the, you know, to a higher up place in the Himalayas. It would look very different if I struggled walking. You know, if I had an ulcer here in Leeds, and I had an ulcer, you know, if I was back in Nigeria again, or in Nepal, it would look very different. So there are environmental factors. And then on top of that, we've got personal factors. So I'm a woman. Women with disabilities have different challenges and barriers that they face to men with disabilities. Mothers with disabilities face different challenges than non-mothers. People who are educated, people who are not educated, people who can speak English, because a lot of the information and the resources are in English. And if you speak a language where the resources are not available, it's different. So actually, disability is not a simple concept. It's quite complicated, and it has layer upon layer upon it. And we're learning to understand that more. And I've talked about the WHO International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health, or the ICF for short. But as well as that, we are understanding more and more within the leprosy world that disability is a human rights issue. And that has come a lot about from our work with the disability rights movement, mainly with the international treaty, which is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, or the CRPD. And we're realizing that there are rights that everybody has, but that sadly, people with disabilities, whether they're caused by leprosy or not, they have been systematically and institutionally, they've faced barriers to actually realize those rights, be they rights to education, be they rights to housing, be they rights to justice in the courts of law, be they rights to vote and take part in politics, maybe as candidates, right to work, right to rehabilitation. There are a lot of articles in the convention. So disability is not just one thing, and it's not just about having an ulcer on my foot, or it's not just about having problems using my hands or seeing with my eyes. It's much bigger than that. And I think that has been the biggest learning for the leprosy world in the last 20 to 30 years.